Welcome to Justice Trek. My name is Ted Kilvington, and this is an audio and video log that journeys through comic book history as I discuss individual comic book stories of Star Trek, the Justice Society, and the world's greatest superheroes, the Justice League of America. Justice Trek is the only show devoted to the entirety of these great comic book series, from the 1940 debut of the JSA, the launch of the JLA and Star Trek comic books in the 1960s, and right up to comics hot off today's shelves. This show will impact you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, I'm Ted Kilvington. Welcome to Justice Trek. In today's episode, we are going to talk about Marvel Comics Star Trek number 4 from 1980. The way I'm covering my Star Trek comics, every Tuesday I'll be alternating between a 1980s Trek comic and a current Trek comic. Last week I did IDW Star Trek number 400 from 2022. Today I'm going to be doing a comic from the 80s. Now it'll actually be story arcs. So this is a two-part episode. So next week I'll be back to cover the finishing chapter of this story. And then the week after that, I will be covering a comic from 2022. So also available for your viewing and listening pleasure, we have previous shows, such as last week's episode 10, covering Star Trek number 400. We had episode 11, where I covered the Justice League of America number 159 from 1978, with special guest Ross Aitken from the Stop, Let's Team Up podcast. And now we're on episode 12. So please click like, please click subscribe. Let's get on with the show. First time I read this comic was when I bought it off eBay about 3 years ago. It was a decent enough comic at the time. When the Marvel Star Trek first came out, I thought, hey, I want to buy all the Marvel Star Trek. But distribution was not the best at that time, and there were some months where I literally could not find a given issue of a given comic. So once I missed issue 3, I didn't follow through on future issues of Marvel Star Trek. My reference copy for this episode, I did have the copy that I bought off eBay a few years ago. And I also have a reprint in the Eagle Moss graphic novel collection, where they reprinted the first few issues of Marvel Star Trek. A bit of background information before we get into the comic. Mainly just that the story in this issue takes place immediately after the film Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Brief roll call in order of appearance. We have Captain James T. Kirk, Commander Spock, Chief Petty Officer Janice Rand, Commander Montgomery Scott, Commander Dr. Leonard McCoy, Lieutenant Commander Nyata Uhura, Lieutenant Commander Hikaru Sulu, Lieutenant Pavel Chekhov, Count Dracula, the Monster of Frankenstein. Plus, we have a couple of characters making their first appearance in any form of Star Trek. It's Rakug, a non-humanoid male who is from the planet Regulus 3, and he represents his people as an ambassador to the Federation. Also, we have Raytag Megora, an insane, non-human Normedia prisoner from the Orlan Quadrant. Star Trek number 4 was published April 1st, 1980 by Marvel, with a July cover date and a 40-cent cover price. The Haunting of Phallus was a 17-page story by Marv Wolfman, writer-editor, Dave Cockrum, pencil artist, Klaus Jensen, ink artist, Jim Novak, letterer, Carl Gafford, colorist. The synopsis below is taken from memory-beta.fandom.com. Now, Honestly, wasn't until I was doing research for the show that I even realized there was a memory beta. I'm familiar, of course, with the memory-alpha.fandom.com websites that basically an online Star Trek fan resource, encyclopedia. I didn't know there was a memory-beta, and honestly, I'm not sure the difference between memory-alpha and memory-beta, but there must be one because they exist. I can tell you one difference. Memory-alpha does not have synopses for all of the Marvel Star Trek comics, but memory-beta does. Captain's Log, Stardate 7416.2. Our shakedown mission have been proving successful. Mr. Spock and I have been ordered to appear before Admiral Fitzpatrick for our first new assignment. At Starfleet headquarters in San Francisco, on planet Earth, Fitzpatrick informs Kirk that he will be transporting Raytag Megara, an escaped Normedia prisoner who has been certified insane. And also being transported will be Federation Ambassador Rakig. They will both be transported to the planet Phallus. And that is the planet from which Raytag escaped. When Chief Petty Officer Janice Rand beams Raytag aboard, he breaks his restraints, grabs a phaser from a security guard, and shoots another. He escapes into engineering, where he taunts the crew with his eyeless species' ability to see with sonar. Kirk shoots the phaser out of his hand, but he lashes back at Kirk with his tail. Captain's Log 7416.3. Commander Scott has quickly jury-rigged an ultra-high-frequency whistle to sound throughout the Enterprise. It is my hope that the ultrasonics, which we humans cannot hear, will prove jarringly painful to the Normedian, enough to disorient him and allow Mr. Spock to take certain actions of his own. The whistle disables Raytag, and Spock renders him unconscious with a Vulcan nerve pinch. Captain's Log, Stardate 7416.4. We are cruising just outside Klingon space. So far, our sensors show no sign of any hostile forces. Aboard the Enterprise, all has been functioning smoothly. As expected, Ambassador Rakig has remained in his quarters. Sometimes I wish all Federation ambassadors were of Regulan temperament. The Enterprise receives new coordinates from Phallus, giving a location 1,000,000 kilometers from the planet. As engineering ensign Siren Williams embraces his girlfriend Lydia in his quarters, they are attacked by a werewolf, which vanishes when Williams throws a bottle of Saurian brandy at it. Chekhov and Sulu are in the rec room when a ghost appears, then disappears in the brig. Raytag begs Kirk and Rakig not to take him back to Phallus when Kirk is called to the bridge. Rakig remains to speak further with Raytag. The ship approaches the coordinates where there is no planet. A creature claiming to be Dracula appears on the bridge, but turns into a bat and then a mist. He escapes into the elevator and thence to C deck, where he kills Rakig by puncturing his neck. Captain's Log, Stardate 7417.7. The Federation has been informed of Ambassador Rakig's bizarre murder, and we have been ordered to proceed with caution. Since his murder, however, there have been no new reports of any manifestations. The Enterprise approaches what appears to be a haunted house floating in space. A landing party, including Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, beam inside the house, where there is a breathable atmosphere. Following a scream, they find the Frankenstein monster strangling a young woman. When phasers have no effect on the monster, Kirk kicks it out the window, resulting in no loss of atmosphere. But many more monsters appear around them. The young woman claims to have been held prisoner by the monsters. A group of Klingons appear with weapons drawn, their leader telling Kirk, "There is no escape." Captain's Log, Stardate 7417.4. Commander Scott recording. From the moment our landing party entered the house, I haven't heard nary a sound from him. I have notified Starfleet and am awaiting further instructions. A Klingon ship appears, and its commander claims the Enterprise has violated Klingon space. He says the landing party has been captured and demands that the Enterprise surrender. In the brig, Raytag begins laughing. To be continued. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the synopsis. I hope you are enjoying my kitten's antics. She gets jealous of the attention I pay to you, so I apologize for that, folks. Please remember, she's just a kitten. And she is jealous of you. All right, I'm going to do the credits now. I like to do the credits in the middle of the episode so people actually watch them. And then afterwards, come back for my page-by-page analysis of Marvel Comics Star Trek number 4. Stick around, it'll be good. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to send them to me on Twitter under the handle @JusticeTrek or via email at thejusticetrek@gmail.com. Be sure to include the word "the" at the beginning of the email address. For research purposes, I rely heavily on dc.fandom.com, memory-alpha.fandom.com, comicvine.gamespot.com, the Grand Comics Database at comics.org, and Mike Boyle's website, Mike's Amazing World of DC Comics at dcindexes.com. The opinions expressed are solely those of the host and any participants. This podcast is not a commercial enterprise and does not make any money. All copyrights are held by their respective owners. The opening sequence was animated by Craig Smith of Phoenix Studios. The opening music is Dragon Slayer by the Makai Symphony. All music used is either public domain and/or not protected by copyright. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Hey, thanks for coming back. I appreciate you have a lot of choices. Thank you for choosing this show, and I will make it worth your time. Just remember, we have other shows out there for you to enjoy, including episode 10, where I discussed Star Trek number 400 from IDW, published in 2022, and episode 11, where I covered 1978's Justice League of America number 159, the first of a two-part JLA JSA team-up with special guest Ross Aitken of the Stop, Let's Team Up podcast. All right, our cover is by Dave Cockrum, pencil art, and Klaus Jensen, ink art. I thought it was a decent enough cover. It's not actually a direct scene from the story, but it is definitely representative of the content. However, Spock refers to Kirk as Jim, which he would not do while on duty. Page 1, a great splash page image showing the Enterprise approaching the haunted house. It reminds me of the scene from the Savage Curtain, the original series, Season 3, Episode 22, where the Enterprise approached the space-bound form of former U.S. President, the late Abraham Lincoln. I mean, just that visual. First saw it when I was a young kid, and wow, seeing Abraham Lincoln floating in space, well, that's not something you expect to see, whether you see it on a ship view screen or anywhere else. Page 2, Ambassador Rakig is humanoid, but he has an insect-like head. Reminds me of a fly, or perhaps even a Greedo from Star Wars, or at least Greedo's species. Page 3, the prisoner Raytag Megora. It looks like a cross between a xenomorph from the Aliens franchise and a velociraptor. Page 4, Kirk tells Sulu to increase speed from warp 1 to warp 4 because he wants the mission over with as soon as possible. Well, if time is of the essence, then why not maximum warp? Now, it's not like they're going to get pulled over for speeding. Page 5. With all of the trouble being caused by the escaped prisoner, why not just store him as a transporter pattern, the way Montgomery Scott was stored for 80 years after the film Star Trek Generations, but before he was rescued in an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation? You could beam up a dangerous person, hold them in a stasis buffer, and then reintegrate them at the destination. Now, some people might argue that would be unethical or immoral, but I don't think it would be any more unethical or immoral than locking this dangerous person up for years. I mean, not only would they not be a threat, but they wouldn't even age. So when they were reintegrated, at least they wouldn't be any worse for the wear. Page 6. I find it surprising that the Vulcan nerve pinch would work on the non-humanoid Normedian Raytag Megora. I mean, the physiology must be all different. I mean, why would you assume the nerve clusters would even be in that location? I mean, yeah, you could try to no-prize it by saying, oh, well, Spock knows where the Normedian nerve cluster is, which is unlikely because this is the first time we've ever seen a Normedian. Page 7, when Spock tells Kirk the new coordinates, Kirk hypothesizes that the new coordinates may be for a prison ship instead. So that would explain why he's willing to go to these non-planet coordinates. Page 8, the werewolf attacks the couple of the Enterprise crewmen that were being amorous and attacks Sulu and Chekhov, and then those monsters quickly disappear. It seems odd that they would disappear so easily, so quickly. I mean, come on. You throw a bottle of brandy at a werewolf, the werewolf is still going to attack you. I mean, werewolves can withstand a bottle of brandy, even if in this case it wasn't a real werewolf. I don't know if they've ever done real werewolves in Star Trek. Here's some fanfic for you. Page 9. Chekhov states that his phaser is Russian-made, kind of implying that the other phasers are not made in Russia. So is this like a paramilitary where everybody brings their own weapon? So it's like one crew member may have a Glock and another may have a Sig Sauer. Maybe one has a Kalashnikov, whatever their weapon of choice may be. I doubt that. I'm pretty sure all of the phasers would be standard made, standard Federation issue. Page 10, the Dracula that appears is similar to the Marvel Comics 1970s version of Dracula that Marv Wolfman had actually written for years in the Tomb of Dracula comic. Page 11, Spock tells Kirk of the Dracula legends, and Kirk replies that he is aware of them. So, obviously, Kirk, having grown up on Earth, would have been exposed to the Dracula legends in some form or another. You might have read the original Bram Stoker novel. You might have read some of the historical lore. You might have seen any of the films that came out between, 1900 and 2264 when the original series started. Don't know how that happened, but it was weird that Spock knew about it. I mean, I wonder if Spock's mom was a Earth horror movie buff. I mean, she was human after all. So can you imagine Amanda Grayson Tesarek, or however the Vulcan married name is for her, and can you imagine her and little Spock crawling up on the couch to watch an old Dracula movie? Could happen. Page 12. In some images, the Enterprise uniforms appear white and powder blue, like they did in the motion picture. But apparently the landing party uniforms are brown. It's not, I mean, I get that they might have like a field jacket on, so when they go on, field missions or away missions, that they might want to have something to protect them, or maybe it's got some environmental properties that are beneficial. Maybe it's phaser resistant or something. But they also wore different colored pants too. So like, put on your away pants. Page 13. While there are no longer red uniforms, and thus no red shirt sacrificial crew members, the extra 2 members of the landing party, after Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, include 1 human and 1 Andorian. Page 14. The version of Frankenstein that appears here resembles the version from Marvel Comics' early 1970 series, The Monster of Frankenstein. Basically the thing, you chalk white with the fur vest. Gosh, I only read the original Mary Shelley novel Frankenstein once, and that was like 30 years ago. I have no memory of whether or not Frankenstein wore a vest, a fur vest, in the novel. Maybe he did. I don't know. Page 15. One of the monsters in this scene resembles the Marvel character Man-Thing. Page 16. These Klingons are the new Ridgehead versions from the motion picture, not the more humanoid Klingons shown on the original series. This is actually my preferred version of the Klingons. I mean, for one thing, it was around the longest, from the motion picture in '79 all the way up through the end of the Star Trek Enterprise series in 2005. Then when they did the Kelvin timeline films, they tweaked the appearance of the Klingons for that. Then they tweaked it even further for the Star Trek Discovery series. And each time they tweaked on that, it was like, I like it less. Of course, they brought back the original Klingon interpretation when they brought in Captain Worf, or Commander Worf, whatever his title is, in Picard Season 3. Finally, on page 17, Raytag Megora acts as if he has some knowledge about what is going on when he bursts into maniacal laughter. Well, I doubt. I mean, he obviously, as I know from having read the next issue, I know why he does it, but it's a good foreshadowing here that somehow he is tied in to the mysterious goings on, both with the monsters appearing and with the Klingons. Final thoughts. So this actually is the final Star Trek story that was ever written by Marv Wolfman. Now, he would go on to edit the first couple years of the DC Comics Star Trek series later in the 80s, but this was the last one he ever wrote. And since the first 3 Trek stories that he did were actually just an adaptation of the motion picture, this is really the only original Star Trek story that Wolfman wrote, and he didn't even finish it because he's gone. It was around this time that he transitioned from Marvel Comics to DC Comics. In fact, you may recall that back in episode 7, I covered a summer 1980 DC Comics story from The Brave and the Bold, where Batman teamed up with the Black Hawk Squadron. And that was written by Marv Wolfman and penciled by Dave Cockrum, both from this the Star Trek series. So in just a couple months, they would go from depicting the 2270s in the Marvel Star Trek to depicting 1940s Earth to Batman and Blackhawks. One for Marvel, one for DC. Quite a big jump. Also, I mean, in terms of his final story, it was a good one. There was some intrigue, and because he set up the story, I'm sure he had some influence. Like he would have given the new editor, some notes or something about where he was going to conclude it, and those notes would have been given to that issue's writer, Mike W. Barr. Let's see, and Artistically, I'm going to say this every time, but Dave Cockrum is a great penciler. He loves Star Trek, and it shows. However, Klaus Janson is not a good fit for Star Trek, in my opinion. His inking is heavy and dark, which is great on a book where you want that dark atmosphere. When he was inking Frank Miller on Daredevil, hey, Daredevil's the environment for Daredevil that was created by Frank Miller was perfect for Klaus Janson's inks. Miller's Daredevil would not have been as successful without Klaus Janson's inks. So this isn't a dig on Janson per se, but sometimes certain artists are not suited for certain genres unless they're willing to modify the work. In my opinion, you may have your opinion. It's all about preference, Doesn't matter, It's like everybody loves their own chili the best. If I liked something different when I make a pot of chili, well, I would make it differently. If I were to try something else and it's like, oh gosh, I never thought of adding, I don't know, cumin or whatever, then I would start adding cumin. And then therefore that would be my new favorite chili recipe. My own plus cumin. Just using that as an example. Different people have different preferences, and I've stated mine for Klaus Janson's inks. But good setup by Wolfman, good pencils by Cockrum. I think it's a good way for Marv to leave Marvel Star Trek. Obviously, it would have been better, I think, if he had been able to finish the story, but he chose to leave when he did. I don't know all the details about why he left. Personally, I think the reason has something to do with the fact that he had been Marvel editor-in-chief for a while in the 70s. Then he stepped down to become just a writer-editor of his own books. And several of the former editor-in-chiefs of Marvel in the 70s, such as Marv, Roy Thomas, Len Wein, and Jerry Conway, they didn't stick around that long into Jim Shooter's tenure as Marvel Comics editor-in-chief. Now, some people did. A lot, Archie Goodwin. He was editor-in-chief at Warren Comics in the 60s, much older than Shooter, and they had a reasonable working relationship. Archie didn't leave Marvel until after Shooter left Marvel, so he was there for the entire Shooter reign. Sorry, that's a little Freudian slip of how I feel about Shooter's tenure at Marvel. But basically, from what I've read, the both sources at the time and historical sources, Marvel had a chaotic atmosphere in the 70s, and Jim Shooter wanted to bring order to the chaos. And many of the people who had previously been in charge, in my opinion, they were uncomfortable with this younger person. I mean, Shooter was only in his 20s, I think, when he started as Marvel editor-in-chief, and they didn't like that this younger person was coming in telling them how to do their jobs when they had already done his job. But one of the reasons Shooter was brought in was specifically to change the way that things were done. I mean, that wasn't, if Marvel liked the atmosphere, whether you think it was chaotic or not, before Shooter, then they wouldn't have told Shooter, rein in the chaos. So Shooter was doing what he did. And, again, a lot of people at Marvel stuck with Shooter. So you can't say, oh, well, he was this horrible tyrant. I'm basically, there were some people that didn't get along with him and they left. And I think it was primarily due to him. Yes, there was DC and they loved DC. It doesn't matter how much you enjoy writing Spider-Man. It's not the same as writing Batman. So sometimes you just want to switch it up. But I think for the four former editors-in-chiefs of Marvel that left for DC, on that note, I think a lot of it was a personality clash. Okay, enough about that. You haven't read this comic? Check it out. Also, you can check out our previous episodes, such as episode 10, where I covered Star Trek number 400 from IDW, published in 2022. Episode 12, where I covered, episode 11. This is episode 12. Episode 11, where I covered JLA number 159, published by DC in 1978. First of a two-part JLA JSA team-up with special guest Ross Aitken of the Stop! Let's Team Up podcast. Now, also, in future episodes, next episode, number 13, will be the second part of that team-up, where I'll be covering, with Ross Aitken, JLA number 160 from 1978. And finally, 1 week from now, episode 14, I will cover Marvel Star Trek number 5 from 1980, the conclusion to this story arc. Hey, please click like, please click subscribe, and keep on Justice Trekking.